Okay, so I welcome you to my class, and I hope you are well. Translation is a very important process. I call it process because it requires some specific activities, some specific knowledge, and some specific techniques or strategies that you must follow very strictly. Because translation is also involved with fidelity. Translation is involved with authenticity and credibility. Suppose you translate, and if your translation is not faithful, it is a kind of treachery to the source text. So if you want to remain faithful to the source text, you have to follow some specific rules and regulations. You should have theoretical frameworks, and you should have also specific guidelines to translate a source text into a target text. And you know that there are always some important things missing while we translate. But we have to have a commitment to the source text or to the source writer. And our commitment will reduce these losses. So you have to keep the losses below. And if you can do it, or if you can ensure the minimum loss of the properties of the source text, then I think that very translation and that very translator may be successful. Though 100% success in translation is never guaranteed. You can't guarantee 100% authenticity or 100% credibility of a translation, because there are some terms and terminologies in the source text that may not be properly translated or translatable in your target language. That is called untranslatability. And there are also variations in terms of tone, voice, attitudes, or in terms of emotional attachment with the language. For example, Bengali language is more emotional than English language. Or English language is more intellectual than Bengali language. So there are always some specific variations or differences between languages. And that's why while you translate, it's quite impossible to guarantee that you can be 100% successful as a translator, or you can hold all the properties, that is 100% properties of the source text into our target text. But an honest translator is always committed to reduce these losses. So how can we reduce the losses? Or how can we call a translation good translation? Or how can we know that a translation is a failure or a translation is successful? If we want to come to our decision regarding a translation success or failure, we have to know the evaluation process. You have to know how to evaluate a translation. Now, how will you evaluate a translation? you should have some parameters. And with the help of these parameters, you have to evaluate a translation. We are not the authority. So we cannot say this one is good or that one is bad. So how can we call a translation failure, or how can we call a translation a success? If we use some parameters which are acknowledged widely, and if we can apply these tools or apparatuses for evaluating translation, the tools and apparatuses which are acknowledged widely, then we can confidently call a translation successful, or we can call a translation unsuccessful. So for evaluating translation, you should have some ideas regarding these parameters. You can borrow these parameters from some theorists, translation theorists. For example, John Dryden, or for example, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, or for example, George Steiner, or André Lefebvre, or Jacques Derrida. So these are the translators or translation theorists who contributed immensely to the spread of this branch of epistemology, that is the field of translation. So first of all, I like to make you acquainted with, in brief, Dryden's parameters. That is, what does he say regarding the translation process? As I have told you, that translation is a process. So what process does he prefer? And what process can reduce the losses? Or what process can help us fight back the untranslatability of our text? So I think you have already known Dryden's conception of translation or theories of translation. Now, for your sake, I just like you to ruminate or recollect Dryden's translation theory so that you can use this tool to evaluate translation. And remember, towards the end of our class, we will practically evaluate a piece of text, a piece of translated text. So for just a minute, Mohittin sir has phoned me. Please. Assalamualaikum ভাই, বলুন ভাই, ক্লাস নিচ্ছি। ভালো আছি ভাই। ভাই বলুন। হুম 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 হুম। ভাই 15 মিনিট বলেছে ভাই। হ্যাঁ আহ, ভাই ওই প্রেজেন্টেশনের সময় একটু থাকবেন, মানে আমরা পুরো হাউস থাকলাম আর কি। হুম হুম হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, ওই যে মুসলিম ভাই নাকি? ইয়েস ইয়েস ইয়েস। হুম হুম হুম। ভাই ওই ফাঁকে ফাঁকে আর কি, হ্যাঁ। ওই দিনে বোধহয় স্যারেরাও ব্যস্ত থাকবেন, ওই যে ফেয়ার আছে, স্যারেরা উঠে উঠে যাবেন একটু দেখতে টেখতে। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ। আচ্ছা ভাই, যদি পারেন, হ্যাঁ আমরা আজকে একটু, হ্যাঁ একটু উপস্থিতি দেখালাম আর কি। না না, পুরো থাকবো না ভাই, ওই প্রেজেন্টেশন। ও মুসলিমেরটাতে হয়তো 10:30 পর্যন্ত তো ভাই আছি। হ্যাঁ, ওই পর্যন্ত হবে। তারপরে প্রেজেন্টেশনটা দিয়ে আমি বেরিয়ে যাব ওই এএমসিসি থেকে। এই আমার যে, আমাদের যে কাজ আছে ওগুলো চালিয়ে যাব ভাই। আচ্ছা ভাই, এমনি ভালো আছে? আচ্ছা, সাবধান সাবধান, কিন্তু এখন অনেকেই বলছে যে ওই যে করোনার একটা ভ্যারিয়েন্ট নাকি ঝামেলা করছে, অনেকে জ্বরে হাসপাতাল পর্যন্ত যেতে হচ্ছে এই অবস্থা। হ্যাঁ, আপনি একটু ইন অ্যাডভান্স একটা নর্মাল নাপা খেয়ে ফেলতে পারেন, এটা ফ্রেশ লাগবে। হ্যাঁ। হুম হুম হুম। আচ্ছা ভাই, দেখেন কি ইবনে সিনা এই যে এইদিকে আসবেন ধানমন্ডি। ও হ্যাঁ 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 দেখেছি। আচ্ছা ভাই, না ভাবছিলাম যে এইদিকে যদি আসেন তাহলে একটু একসাথে চা খেলাম আর কি। ইনশাল্লাহ। আচ্ছা, তো ভাই ভালো থাকবেন, জি জি। আমি এই যে ক্লাস নিচ্ছি, একটা অনলাইনে ক্লাস নিচ্ছি, এক্সট্রা ক্লাস নিচ্ছি, অসুবিধা নেই। হ্যাঁ ভাই, ঠিক আছে। হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, জি, ঠিক আছে। সালাম আলাইকুম। Okay, I am really sorry because I had to pick up the phone. Anyway, so first of all, I just like to draw your attention to the translation theory of John Dryden. Dryden has classified translation into three categories. Number one, metaphrase. Number two, paraphrase. And number three, imitation. I think you are well acquainted with these categories of translations. The first one is metaphrase, word for word translation or line for line translation. You know it. And this kind of translation is not supported by John Dryden. So I think these points, that is, which you support and which you don't support, is very important. Because if you support metaphrase, you will use this apparatus to evaluate a translation. And if you support paraphrase, so you will use or utilize or apply this apparatus to evaluate a translation. Or if you support imitation, you will use this apparatus to uh, evaluate a translation. So which one you support and which one you do not support is very important. You may use metaphrase, but you have to establish, you have to prove that you are convincing. That's very important. Or suppose you sorry, or suppose you are using imitation. So these very apparatus, while you use, you have to make your readers convinced that you are right. I do not like to impose anything on you. You have to decide which one you will choose. And whatever you choose, you must defend your choice. If you can defend your choice, then okay. But if you can't defend, if you just give your hypothesis, or if you speak from your imagination, that will not be acceptable by your audience. That's why evaluating process is a very, very pragmatic process. You have no chance to say anything from your imagination or hypothesis. Just say what you want to say, and then you have to establish what you say. So anyway, paraphrase is more preferred by Dryden. Dryden has said that success is usually found in paraphrase. So what is paraphrase? Paraphrase is a translation, which usually puts emphasis on sense, the reflection of sense, not on word for word translation, but for sense translation. So sense is very important. You may change the syntax of the sentences, remember. Or you can also change the structure of sentences. You can even change the diction of sentences. Your focus is on sense or the meanings. So you have to grasp the proper meanings of the text and bring it or convey it to your target readers. So paraphrase is more preferred by John Dryden. And how will you call a translation good or bad? A good translation must strike a balance. So balance is very important. Two important aspects while evaluating a text you have to keep in mind. Number one, balance. And number two, inclusivity. Balance, the balance between language and meaning. Remember, the balance between language and meaning. You must consider while you are evaluating a text. And inclusivity, what does it mean? Inclusivity means you have to see whether your translation includes or accommodates all the intellectual properties, all the meanings, all the connotations, or all the effectiveness of your source text. You have to ensure. So your translation must not exclude. Your translation must include. So inclusivity and balance. These are the two major aspects of a translation or translated text. So if I give you a piece of translation and ask you to evaluate it, you have to at first think of what intellectual properties the source text possesses and whether these intellectual properties are properly or appropriately sustained in the target text. So the balance and inclusivity are very important aspects of a translated text. And these two aspects, the presence of these two aspects makes a translation faithful. And this kind of translation is capable of conveying the spirit of the author of the source text to the target readers. You know that translation is bridging. It is just like a connecting root. It connects the source text with the target text. And this connectivity will be effective if you can ensure these two important aspects, that is balance and inclusivity. Now, come to George State. And I think you know his hermeneutic motion. Hermeneutic motion. You have to know these ingredients of hermeneutic motions to judge or to evaluate a translation. George Stater means to say that translation is an act of understanding. So translation is undoubtedly a linguistic process. That is, you are transforming one language into other. So translation always involves transference. That is transference of language, transference of meanings from one language to other language. So translation is a linguistic process. But at the same time, translation is also a cognitive process. So remember, cognitive process. Cognition means understanding, your intellectual ability to understand something, analyze something, to collect something, or to interpret something. Okay. So, sorry, Ajahn is going on. So I think you will not mind if you wait for 1 minute, please. Let's wait for 1 minute because Ajahn is going on. All right. Welcome back. So George Steiner's hermeneutic motion is constituted by fold processes. For example, trust. Number 2, aggression. Number 3, incorporation. And number 4, restitution. So while you evaluate a text, you have to consider these things also. Whether the translation is capable of maintaining trust between two texts, or whether the text which is translated deserves to be translated, you have to know it before evaluating our text. An aggression, how a translator approaches the text, how he breaks the text into different pieces and how he connects among these pieces. An incorporation, that is how a translator brings the point meanings into the target language. So how the translator has done it, you have to think of it. While you are evaluating a text, you have to think whether the translator is able to bring the meanings from a foreign language to the native language or to his language or target language. And last of all, you have to consider whether the translated text is aligning with the source text. If there is no alignment between the two texts, that is the source text and the target text, then that very translation may not be called a translation. It is a new text. So George Steiner has said that every translation is a new text or rewriting or reproduction. But reproduction does not mean that it should be segregated totally from the source text. It should have an intrinsic, nuanced connectivity between two texts. Very subtle connectivity. Otherwise, you cannot call it a translation. It may be an individual or independent text. Undoubtedly, a translated text is an independent text. For example, while you recite Homer's Iliad in English, you feel this is the original text because you do not know the Greek language. Or while you are reciting Mahabharata or Ramayana in Bengali, you may feel that it is the original text because you do not know Sanskrit language. You haven't read the manuscript in Sanskrit language. So translation is always creating a new text, undoubtedly. But translation must not be detached or deviated objectionably from the source text. Yes, there is always some deviations. There is always some detachment. But this detachment does not mean that it should be absolutely detached from the source text. So restitution is very important. And while you are evaluating a text, you have to consider whether it has achieved equilibrium. Equilibrium means balance, remember. I have just mentioned two words. One is balance and other is inclusivity. So a good translation must compensate the original for the raid performed upon it. You are raiding means you are aggressively approaching a text. You are splitting up the text. But at the same time, you have to reorganize all the ingredients that you split up. So as a translator, your duty is not to break up only. Yes, it's your duty to break up, and it's also your duty to reconstruct or reconnect. Okay. Now, another translation theorist, Audrey Lefebvre, we have to know some parameters from him. And the parameters that he has mentioned may help us to evaluate our text authentically. Three important terms always cross our mind while delving deeper into the translation theory of Audrey Lefebvre. Power, patronage, and poetics. And what's the key concept of Andre Lefebvre's translation theory? He has said that translation is always a rewriting. It's never neutral. So it's very important. Just recollect Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Spivak has said that translation is political. Translation is never innocent because the translator always imposes his own or her own ideology, political ideology, especially upon the translated text. You have your own point of view, and you impose your point of view upon the text that you translate. And that's why translation is a highly manipulated process. It's a manipulated process. That is, you are manipulating a text. You are manipulating a text with what? With your subjective ideas, emotions, impulses, ideologies, cultural connectivities, epistemological connections or involvements. So you always negotiate with the text in terms of your ideology, your culture, your aesthetics, and your location. So that's why Andre Lefebvre has said that translation is highly manipulated. It's a manipulated process. It is not neutral at all. So now what do we derive from Andre Lefebvre to evaluate a translation? We know from him that while evaluating a translation, we have to know the difference between the source text and the target text. And we have to find out whether the translated text is manipulated or not, or how far is it manipulated, is the question. You must question it. Our translation is a manipulated text, undoubtedly, but how far is it manipulated? You have to know the limit. If it is highly manipulated, then the translation should have a different status. And if it is tolerably manipulated, then okay. Manipulation does not mean misinterpretation. Remember, manipulation means here reinterpretation. You can reinterpret, but you can't misinterpret. If a text is misinterpreted by a translator, that's a failure. That is not a successful translation. So while you are going to evaluate a text, you should have the knowledge, you should have the intellectual faculty to decipher or to differentiate a target text from a source text in terms of cultural, political, ideological, epistemological, aesthetic dynamics. So you should have that capacity to understand. Otherwise, your evaluation may be wrong. And the evaluative criteria that we learn from Andre Lefebvre, and you find it at the bottom of this PowerPoint slide. The translation is evaluated by its function within the target system. Accuracy is often sacrificed to make the text fit the target culture's ideological and aesthetic requirements. Suppose you were translating a Marxist text for an anti-Marxist readership. I suppose you were translating a feminist text for an anti-feminist readership. Or suppose you were translating an atheistic text for artistic readership, then what will you do? You have to translate the text in such a way that it fits the target readers. Otherwise, your translation will not be accepted or welcomed by your reading faculty or reading readership or reading members. So while you are evaluating a text, you have to see how far the translator is successful in doing this. That is, in making the text fit for the readership. And for doing this job, how far he is deviated from the source culture or source text or the meanings of the source text. So you have to consider this while you are evaluating a text. And now you find Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, a living legend. She's still alive and we wish her a very, very long life. She has already contributed immensely to our post-colonial theories, subaltern studies, and translation studies. She is also an uncompromising feminist. She is not what should I say? That is, she is not a traditional intellectual. She is an activist intellectual. She gives theories and at the same time, she comes to the field and works for the people. And that's why she is widely celebrated. She is also my favorite theorist. And I believe you have learned a lot about her translation theories. As we have learned her translation theory in our class through, she has focused on a translator's duty. She has also focused on the concept of translatability and untranslatability. And she has also given a concept of alterity, that is otherness. Otherness. So now let's have some few more words to know her theory and to know how we can use our theoretical apparatus to evaluate our text. Spivak warns against safe translations that erase the cultural specificity of third world texts to make them easily digestible for Western audiences. Actually, this point will make you think about the political intention of translation. Translation can misinterpret, misrepresent, and malrepresent. So while you are translating a text, if you have a deliberate intention to misinterpret the text, you can do it. You can impose your own ideology upon the text. You can also change the terms and terminology. So you can also misinterpret it. So never say that translation is innocent. Then what should be the duty of a translator? If you want to save a text from deviation or from distortion of meanings, then what should you do? It's a very common question. While studying Spivak's theory, and while we call a translation political, then a very relevant question crosses our mind. So what's that question? What should be the duty of a translator? And we can answer to this question in terms of Spivak. Spivak, by borrowing some words from Spivak, we can say that The duty of a translator is to surrender to the text and feel the closeness or intimacy of the original language's toughness. I have already told you that there are always differences, some differences between the source language and the target language. For example, I have also mentioned that English is a language of intellectual expression, and Bengali is a language of emotional expressions. So this language can never be the same. Every language has got some distinct characteristics that may not coincide the similar ingredients of other language. Then what should be the duty of a translator? The translator should have the linguistic capacity to understand the meanings of the text, number one. Number two, he should have also the emotional and intellectual faculty to understand the gap between two languages. And he should have the dexterity or the skill to reduce this gap. And if he can reduce this gap, then he may be successful to some extent or to a great extent. That is called closeness between two languages. Languages are always different in terms of many things. But a translator's job is to make these differences less annoying, because differences always annoy the readers. So if the differences are reduced, then annoyance will also reduce. And the ethical translation, that is the evaluating criteria that Spivak teaches us, is an ethical translation must preserve the alterity of the origin. If the translation sounds too much like standard or bland English, it has failed the original text's identity. So it's very important. I do request your attention to this particular text. An ethical translation must preserve the alterity, that is otherness, of the original. If the translation sounds too much like standard or bland English, it has failed the original text identity. That is translation. Again, we may go back to Lefebvre, that translation is a manipulation. That is, if your translation is too much like the source text, and if the source text is lost in translation. So I think you can remember this. If the source text is lost in the target text, then that very translation is a failure, because translation always make a distinct borderline between these two. This is source text, and this one is the target text. So translation is not the source text, and the source text is not the translation. There is always a line between these two. So a translator must maintain this distinction between two. And what is the biggest challenge for him? The biggest challenge for him is that he must maintain this line between two. And at the same time, he has to feel the closeness between these two and convey this closeness to the target readers. So this is really difficult. It's a very, very complicated job for a translator. So we, the translators, suppose I am also a translator, and there are many translators among you. You can also translate. But translation does not mean transformation or transference of language. And if you read, speak back, you can understand it. You will also agree with me. And then come to Jacques Derrida. Derrida, I think you know it. Derrida has said that translation is impossible. And at the same time, translation is necessary. We need translation because it's not possible, logically possible, credibly possible for us to know all the languages of the world. But we inherit the intellectual property of the world. I have my inheritance to the intellectual property of the people from Greece, the people from Japan, the people from any corner of the world. And they have also the inheritance to our intellectual property. So that's why we claim today that we are global. We are global citizens. We are cosmopolitans. So we need translation. And in Derrida, you will find some keywords that will help you understand the proper process of translation. For example, relevant. And number two here. So relevant translation, Derrida actually challenges the idea that a pure meaning exists independently of language. And translation is necessary and quite impossible. That is a paradox, necessary and impossible. Then what should be the evaluating criteria? Translation is not about equivalence, that is not same or similar, but about transformation. A translation is evaluated by how it reveals the survivability and living on of the original text. For example, you have read Oedipus Rex in English. You do not even know that it was originally written in Greek language. So I do not know. We do not know. But while we recite Oedipus Rex in English, we feel no problem. We face or we encounter no problem. We feel this is the original text. This is called survivability. That is, this Oedipus Rex survives in translation. We do not bother about its manuscript in Greek language, but we enjoy this text in English. That's why it is a successful translation, because it is surviving today, even in translation. Suppose you are reading Panchatantra in Bengali. The fables are there, 82 fables are there. So you are enjoying it in Bengali. You do not even bother about its original version. It was written 350 BC. That is 350 years before the birth of Jesus Christ in this subcontinent. We are proud of this Panchatantra. It's our intellectual property and we inherit it. So we learn all the stories from this Panchatantra in Bengali, and we feel this is the original text. We do not bother about its Sanskrit version, which was written by Vishnu Sharma, or some people call him Chanakya. This is the survivability. That is, our text survives in translation. So I think you have got some long and short of these translators' theories. And if you want to evaluate our text, you have to apply these theoretical apparatuses very properly. And the application, proper application requires your proper command of these theories. So I do request you to think very seriously of all these theoretical ingredients. And these theoretical ingredients will help you evaluate our text properly. So this is all about my today's lecture. And in the next lecture, I will make you acquainted with some more apparatuses or ingredients that will help you evaluate our text properly, our translated text properly. And in the next class, I will also make you practice very practically the evaluation of translation. That is, I will supply you with a piece of translated text, and I will ask you to evaluate it from different theoretical perspectives. I will also work with you. So we both will work, we both will evaluate or review each other. So in the next class, I hope you will participate with lots of questions and curiosities. Okay, stay tuned. And this is the end of my question. Now I like to invite some questions from you. Okay, what's your question, please?
কালকে আমাদের ক্লাসটা হচ্ছে স্যার?
No question. Tomorrow you will not have the classes because I think you are already notified that our Alumni Association program will start at 1 o'clock and it will continue till 3 or 3:30 p.m. For that reason, the department has requested us to conduct the class or manage the class today. Okay? So that's why I am here with you, though online, but I am here with you today because it's not possible for us to conduct the classes in the second half of the day because the program that is organized by our department is very crucial. We have to be there. We have to share our views. We have to be there. That's why tomorrow you will have no classes in the second half of the day. And that's why I am here with you today. And the materials that I have shared with you in your WhatsApp group, I do request you to learn very seriously. Learn very seriously. And in the next class, that is the day after tomorrow, we will discuss all these issues in detail in the classroom. And we will also practice there or how to use these apparatuses to evaluate our text in the classroom. We will learn it in the classes the day after tomorrow. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Any more questions from you? No question?
No, sir.
Okay, I do request you to mention your ID numbers in your WhatsApp group so that I can keep you attendance. You must not miss your attendance. It's very important.
Okay, sir. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice time and enjoy yourselves.
Good night, sir.
Good night. Good night, Moon. Good night. Good night. Goodbye. Goodbye.
স্যার
Goodbye.
কালকে কি ভার্সিটিতে ক্লাস হবে স্যার? স্যার ইনফরমেশনটা কি একটু দিতে পারবেন?
In the first half of the day, you will have classes. But in the second half, you will have no classes. As I have classes with you in the second half, so no chance to meet me or meet you tomorrow.
স্যার
We will
আরেকটা
meet day
কোশ্চেন
after
ছিল।
tomorrow. Yes?
স্যার আমাদের যে অ্যাসাইনমেন্টের হার্ড কপিটা হবে ওটা কি হচ্ছে সিআর এর কাছে জমা দিয়ে দিব?
Yes, yes, you may submit it.
ওকে স্যার, সানডেতে দিব স্যার।
Yes, okay.
ওকে স্যার, থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার।
Thank you very much.
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার। গুড নাইট স্যার। হ্যাভ এ নাইস ডে।
Good night. Good night.